The further I get from the Spider-Noir finale, the more frustrated I find myself feeling. Because here's the thing. Sony finally delivered a Spider-Man adjacent product that knocked it out of the park. Spider-Noir is a visual and stylistic masterpiece anchored by the bold choices of Nic Cage's performance. But the substance of this first season, the show is set in the Depression era 1930s New York, and well, aside from a passing acknowledgement of poverty and class warfare and racism and even Nazis, which are a core part of the show's lore, Spider-Noir feels reluctant to actually explore any of these themes, instead prioritizing a far safer, inoffensive world-building origin story. Now don't get me wrong. It works, but it also feels shallow. A low-calorie 8-episode feast dressed up in an objectively gorgeous visual style. I actually have my theories about this, and after Project Hail Mary, the emerging pattern seems to be that Lord and Miller, who, yes, are the executive producers on this show, that was spun out of the animated Spider-Verse films, which they also produced. These guys just seem too timid for art that demands to go deep, tragic, and maybe even punch a square in the everything's a woke mind virus noggin. My name is Crumbine. I am a writer, filmmaker, and storyteller. This is Emergency Creative, a place where I explore the choices that shape the movies and television we love and, yes, love to hate. Season 1 of Spider-Noir, the aesthetic is cranked all the way straight up to 11, and yes, it works. But if this equation is reduced to style over substance, the question becomes, is style enough to make a successful show? The core premise of this slow-burn detective thriller is that mob boss Silvermane, played pitch perfect by Brendan Gleeson, is recruiting superpowered World War I veterans to assert his power and swing the Prohibition-era New York City's mayoral election for his own, hand-picked candidate. Nic Cage is Ben Reilly, updated from his last outing as Peter Parker in the Spider-Verse films for legal reasons, and at this point in the story, Riley has put his web-slinging days far behind him. He does not want to be anyone's hero. But then she showed up, and what a dame she was. Legs straight down to the floor, a voice that could melt the coldest of hearts, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms. Hell, she was the complete set, if ever there was one. Look, there are times when craft really should be invisible. As a writer, I don't want you paying any attention to my prose because I want you lost in the story that I'm trying to tell. As a professional video editor, I want you lost in whatever narrative the film or video is telling. But if all you see are these hyperactive half-second TikTok editing techniques, you are not paying attention to the story anymore because you're too busy having a sensory seizure while double-fisting dueling infinite scrolls. Or something, I don't know. Cinematography, your shot composition, lighting, lenses, how the camera moves, this is similar to writing and editing in that it should serve the story, but not distract from it. It needs to be a feast for your eyes while your brain is munching on that tasty narrative. For a casual viewer, it should look great and tell a story, but for enthusiasts, people who really sink their teeth into this stuff, it should be an artistic, all-you-can-eat buffet. And if you turn off the sound on Spider-Noir, especially the black and white version, although the color version is almost almost as tasty. If you watch this show for the visuals alone, it is an absolute insane feast for your eyes. Shooting black and white is it's a very specific process. You are lighting scenes in this intentional high contrast way, and you can feel it through the screen just how much fun the Spider-Noir team was having painting with their lights, tilting the camera for delicious angles, and not just once when the world suddenly turns upside down, but fearlessly and consistently wielding the camera like it is framing a shot from a comic book. The Sin City comparison is painfully obvious, and Spider-Noir's aesthetic absolutely harkens back to Tim Burton's Batman, and also Ang Lee's Hulk, which I maintain is the best Hulk movie, and I do think that Spider-Noir proves that Ang Lee got a bad shake. For full spectrum enthusiasts, the show uses a color grading technique to simulate the look of vintage black and white footage that has then been colorized. It is vibrant, deliberately oversaturated, and styled after 1950s Technicolor, making certain colors almost bleed right off the screen. These are two extremely distinct visual styles, and yes, black and white is the correct way to watch the show and the objectively best way to watch the show, but either style offers an incredible visual treat for viewers. The choice to go all in on these aesthetics adds volumes to the story without distracting from it. And however you choose to watch it, I can assure you it is unlike anything you have seen before. That unique originality, that uber nostalgic throwback is a bold and very fresh take, not just for the superhero space, but for television in general. For me, the final strand of Spider-Noir's carefully crafted web of delectable aesthetic is the pitter-patter of the thriller noir dialogue. Now, personally, I am from the Sorkin school of writing, and I just adore the unreal musicality of well-crafted dialogue. The thriller noir style ratchets this musicality up to another level altogether. When Ben Reilly and Kat Hardy start flirting and the words start flying, or when Megawatt begins monologuing, again, in this crazy heightened theatrical cadence, you have this moment where you step back and realize there is absolutely no reason something like this should even exist right here, right now in 2026. And that it does exist, that these creatives made these choices not to appeal to a teenage demo or because it's the same thing that every other superhero show has ever done, but they made these choices for the sheer joy of the creative style itself. For me, that really feels like reason enough to celebrate Spider-Noir. And I think that choice of aesthetic over story works fairly well here because Spider-Noir isn't actually a superhero show. It's a gritty detective noir that just so happens to feature a superhero. The goal seems to have been to tell a hard-boiled detective story with just a few dashes of superhero action tossed in for flavoring. Flip Bam! This choice allows the show to wield its budget pretty damn effectively. Instead of filling episodes with endless, weightless CGI slop, the vast majority of the show is real people on real sets being framed in gorgeous, real lenses with loving intentionality. Real lenses as opposed to fake lenses that would be used for entirely CG-produced shots. One of my big concerns going into the show was how it was going to handle Nic Cage's, age. Because, well, yes, his voice is fan-fucking-tastic in the Spider-Verse films, but in live action, well, okay, let's just be honest here. The man is getting a little on the older side, and I was really worried that the show would, I don't know, but just pretend he was a typical superhero once the mask goes on. But Nic Cage, he plays his age. They're not hand-waving or trying to de-age him. Ben Reilly is a man well past his prime, and the Spider is nowhere near as spry as he, used to be. Cage described his performance as 70% Humphrey Bogart and 30% Bugs Bunny. The show's 8 episodes start in this hard-boiled Bogart territory, escalating into the absurd to match that Bugs Bunny energy. It starts out slow, moody, and hyper-focused on Ben Reilly's detective work. And as the Spider shows up more and more, that gorgeous cinematography gets more playful. The fast pitter-patter of the 1930s noir dialogue kicks into high gear, and Cage's performance gets more Spider-like. I love this take on the character. He was bitten by a mutant man-spider, and when he's feeling more arachnid than human, he starts doing these absurd ticks, jerks, and physical seizures, like a literal actual spider. Nic Cage is weird enough to want to craft a characterization like that, and also he is big enough, star power wise and executive producer wise, to actually pull it off. And like the visual aesthetic, it works. It's also definitely a choice that no one else has ever made in the history of Spider-Man film, which for me, again, just plays as fucking cool because we haven't seen something like this before. This portrayal is unique and original and creative as hell, and it is 100% all Nic Cage. This willingness to embrace the weird is, I think that's the show's real strength. Spider-Noir is not afraid to be different, which, as it turns out, is really good because apparently, for legal reasons, the show legally had to be different. Sony wasn't allowed to call it Spider-Man or use the Peter Parker character. That was kind of a blessing. Sony's legal shackles have the ironic effect of freeing Cage and company from the shackles of corporate continuity and toxic fan expectations. They aren't tethered to this legacy or those decades of source material. Even the original Spider-Man noir comic run spanned barely 20 individual issues. Ultimately, the show was unburdened and free to take the core idea, a version of Spider-Man in 1930s New York, and have this complete creative freedom to develop a wildly different, completely fresh interpretation of Spider-Man lore. That creative freedom allows the show to craft a world from the ground up, which is exactly how this first season plays. Style and world building first, setting the stage for what I hope to be more aggressive and deeper narratives in, future seasons later. What struck me was how grounded this world building actually felt. The show features a Depression-era 1930s version of Sandman, Tombstone, and Megawatt, who is absolutely definitely not Electro, shut your filthy mouth, and their superpowers are a result of Nazi genetic manipulation. After Silvermane recruits them, it is through working as muscle for the mob that these henchmen gradually evolve into power-hungry supervillains. We're not just dropped into a world where the Rhino is inexplicably stomping around Manhattan. We're seeing a very logical, grounded evolution that never takes itself quite as seriously as the Penguin or Nolan's Batman Begins, but it still feels tangible enough to allow for those perfectly sensible but silly escalations. And I think that's a very big deal. For all the hard-boiled inspiration, Spider-Noir definitely does not forget to have fun. By the time you get to the end of the season, and despite how shrewd the production was, you do start to feel the limitations of that television budget. You'll notice the exact same street corner set used over and over and over again. This story bounces primarily between the nightclub and Riley's cramped PI office, but these are also sensible production choices. Because of the 1930s setting, the production design is unique and more expensive than just shooting in modern-day New York. It is a hell of a lot easier to dress a single street corner that can then be creatively recycled than it is to build a host of varied, half-baked locations. A smaller and tighter scale results in a more authentic, textured feel, and I will take that trade-off any day of the week if it means getting a more inventive and original piece of art. Does the show suffer from the frustrating slow pace of traditional noir? Yeah, occasionally. The show is not flawless, and I definitely felt it drag in, a few places. But I also think that the slow burn pacing is exactly what you sign up for with such a radically unique genre piece. And even when the story slowed down, the show still did its absolute damnedest to deliver a visual treat that keeps your eyes glued to the screen, which is why I have spent this entire video talking about style over substance, because like I said at the top, the further I get from the season finale, the more frustrated I get that the show did not delve into any of the socio-political issues raised by its Prohibition, Depression-era setting. If you're intentionally playing in that sandbox, address the world you're living in. The show makes a deliberate choice to cast Lamorne Morris as reporter Robbie Robertson, but we don't really explore his challenges navigating the Daily Bugle and 1930s New York as a black man, especially in the context of the Spider, because who really knows what race the man is underneath that notably black mask? These things are very broadly hinted at, but, never really tackled head on. The word prohibition is said a lot, but we never explore how that affects the people of New York, or even Ben Reilly himself, beyond it being a basic function of Silvermane's control over the city. Likewise, Silvermane is effectively buying an election. Super fucking relevant and prescient to the times we're currently living through, but again, it's kind of just a glossed over detail instead of an interrogation of election and political integrity. For me, the deepest exploration the show attempts to deliver, and that is absolutely being generous, is women's rights in this period as depicted through Kat Hardy and how she is, just another object that Silvermane owns and controls and manipulates. Hell, even the backstory about the Nazis creating superpowers, there is so much more to explore there and thematic depths to plumb. That being said, all the seeds have been planted for a far more complex and interesting show. Personally, I do want the show to go deeper. But then again, I am the kind of person who enjoys art that does more than just entertain. I want to learn, I want to be challenged, and I want art that meets the moment it exists in. Season 1 of Spider-Noir, well, it is not that show. Instead, it is a stylistic feast for the eyes. And the more discerning your eyes, the more you will get out of the show. It is a showcase of creative craft, from acting to cinematography to costume and production design. And yeah, it's not very often that style wins out over substance, but I will say that in this case, well, yeah, it comes pretty damn close. And if the show ends up going deeper in season 2, then this shallow feel of its debut season is instantly forgivable, instead playing as the very, very necessary scene-setting and world-building season that it truly is. But there is no season 2, at least not just yet. So we have to judge Spider-Noir for what it is right now and the choices that it made to get here. If you are someone who enjoys hyper-stylized, lovingly crafted, hard-boiled noir aesthetic, you will absolutely have a good time with Spider-Noir. Let me know in the comments if the shallow nature of the substance bothered you, or if you never even noticed it in the first place. Like and subscribe if you like liking and subscribing, and if you really appreciate what I am trying to do here, be sure to check out my feature film and my audiobooks, all free right here on YouTube. The links are in the description. And until next time, stay creative, friends.